Alright, Geeks and Ghouls, this is book 2 of Deadhouse Gates, second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series by Steven Erikson. This series of analysis of my notes while reading these books is based on the fact that I'm rereading this book, so there will be spoilers about this book and also for the rest of Malazan Book of the Fallen. Alright, so if you don't want to be spoiled about the next books, skip this video, put it in your Malazan playlist, and watch it after you finish the series. And if you're doing the reread, the YouTube reread of the series, it will be in 2023. So yeah, that's actually planning for the future of this channel. And while you're here, just press the like button and subscribe to get the next videos, because I'll be doing this to the end. Alright? So in book 2 of Deadhouse Gates, it has 4 books in it. Book 2 is called The Whirlwind, and here the revolution begins, and most of the plot lines are kickstarted in motion. And chapter 6 actually starts in the Total Mines. A lot of stuff is happening there. Long story short, as the rebellion begins, the people there are also rebelling against the Malazans, and Bodin, who has escaped, returns to take Felesin and Heboric. Felesin insists that they take Benneth with them, but he's injured, and Bodin goes alone to retrieve him and returns to say, "Oh, I couldn't, he was dead." Well, it is later revealed that he killed him, because he thought that it was a bad idea rescuing him, and he was bad for Felesin. While Bodin is missing, Felesin and Heboric are attacked by bloodflies. Of course, Heboric, being a former priest, he's protected from them, but Felesin is not, so she is disfigured, she is stung, and while they remove the lavra from the bites, she has been disfigured. And so she loses her beauty as well. And Heboric reveals to her that the escape has been organized by his friend Duiker, because he was a historian too. And that's why the young guard was doing all those questions, because he was Duiker's spy. There are other things happening. I mean, there are some weird shenanigans that happened earlier in chapter 4, and this was because... No, actually we get there later, alright, because we haven't explained what's going on with Bodin. Meanwhile, Duiker, who has enlisted Culp, mates of the 7th Army, they try to find a boat to cross and rescue Heboric, but the rebellion breaks, so Duiker rushes back to Coltrane to write what is going to happen with his exodus, his army in the rebellion. And he learns that Coltrane has managed to save a group of Malazans, of refugees, and they travel looking for safety. And the locals describe the refugees as a chain that binds Coltrane's army down. This is what every Malazan fan knows is the chain of dogs. And the chain of dogs is the reason to read this book. I've said that in my review of the book. The chain of dog is one of the highlights of fantasy fiction. Meanwhile, Fiddler, Crocus, and Napslar finally get to Araku. They cross the Whirlwind, and they found out that there is an old road that has been revealed under the shifting sand, and Fiddler gets the idea that this leads to Tremolor, the fabled gate of a house of the Azath that might allow them to get to Malazan City through the Azath. And he knows that from Quick Ben, because there is a huge story about the bridge burners, Quick Ben and Oracle. Basically, the bridge burners were handing down for Quick Ben in Raraku, and that's how they became the bridge burners. And this also plays a role in the entire series, but we'll get there eventually. in book 9 or 10, I believe. Now, chapter 7. And this is a part that always confused me, because at my first read of Deadhouse Gates, I read this book in 3 days' time, and it took me years to get to later books. So I have lost a lot of details about it, and I was always confused. And it's about Heboric and his ghost hands. And I hope in this reread I am able to get a clearer picture of what is happening with the Jade hands, because I just had to go and see in the wikis what's the deal with that, and oh my god, that's a fuck ton of stuff about the Jade hands. So, Felis and her companions are going through the desert. They try to reach the coast. It's a 10-day journey, and they are ravaged by hunger and thirst. And at some point, they encounter a Jade monolith. Heboric says that this is a finger of a huge Jade hand that is covered by sand, and he touches it. Of course, there's a lot of infighting in this group, as with every other group in this book, and a lot of tensions are created. And this was happening even while they were captives, because everybody had their own agenda and their own ideas of how to survive. At some point, Heboric is left behind. Bodin goes back to save him. Felison goes through his stuff and discovers that there are a lot of assassin gear and other weird items in there. So she is suspicious of what's the deal with Bodin. And Heboric is rescued. He's brought back by Bodin, but he's full of tattoos all over his body. And Bodin tries to heal him because he's dying by trying to open his warren using his tattoos. But what happens is Fenner, Heboric's former god, jumps out into the physical realm, and now he's vulnerable to everybody who's going to harm him. Meanwhile, Fiddler and company are pursued by some natives because they're pursued by some natives because of Fiddler's disguise. He screws up as they meet some people in chapter 5, and they are hunted down by some natives. They are attacked by Soul Taken, and Mappo and Icarium come by them and save them, and the plot lines of Fiddler and of Mappo and Icarium converge for a while. Actually, they converge for the entire book. Chapter 8. Felicin and companions reach the coast. Felicin sleeps with Bodin, hoping to assassinate him, but he knows that, so he stops her. As they've reached the coast, they discover that there are attacks of raging sorcery, but these attacks stop when they reach at them, probably because of the Tatteral, that they have mind and they can affect them, makes them immune to magic. And at this point, a ship appears. It's Culp and some Marines him and Duiker have met earlier, and they have taken a ship. And as Culp takes a look at Heboric, he says that Fenner or Tatteral and something else, he does not know what it is, it's the Jade statue, are fighting for control, and Heboric sort of has like ghost hands now. And also, to add some more tension to this very problematic group, the 3 Marines that help Culp are members of Fenner cult, and Heboric just mouths them off about Fenner. I also mentioned this in the review for the book, but here we have a perfect example of something that Erikson does very, very well, and this is the random encounter in RPG. There is maids there. The Total Minds are turning sorcerers mad, and if there are maids prisoners, they go mad. One of them has escaped the mines, but he has lost all control of himself or of his warren. So it makes perfect sense for a mad maid to be there and to attack the ship or our protagonists, even though he doesn't tie to the plot. He's just someone who is there, and he's there to add some confusion, actually, some complexities to what's happening, to ruin the plan that they had. And that's something that Malazan Book of the Fallen does exceedingly well, to use coincidences that make sense or larger elements, and this makes the world feel grander and unique in this aspect. So that's excellent work, Mr. Erikson. As the group tries to escape, they are dragged into a weird warren, and their ship is damaged, so they abandon it, and they get aboard a mysterious ship that is there. And on this ship, which looks ancient, there are beheaded corpses that are pulling their oars, and there are some other corpses that they don't recognize, but because they belong to a race they don't know, they believe that they are the fabled Tista Endur, the shadow elves of the world. And that ship is Silandra, which is a legendary ship that was lost ages ago as it was trying to reach the lands of the Tista Endur. And this ship really fascinated me on my first read because it was very interesting. It was some of those very colorful magical stuff that Erikson does. And it was a mystery. It wasn't explained what it is. It is explained later on in Midnight Tides. We see this ship created because Midnight Tides is happening years in the past of this world compared to where we are right now. But enough blathering, let's go to chapter 9. Callum meets some bandits, and they invite him to follow them as they are going to rob some Malazan refugees. Of course, he turns on them, he kills them. Great fight scene, by the way. And the refugees is a family. We have an injured Malazan captain, his wife, their 2 sons, and his wife's sister, who has lost her husband. And Callum agrees to help them get to Warren, because the capital of 7 cities, because this is his next stop. And there is a love story building between Callum and Minala, the sister. And okay, I may have said a lot of things about why Guardians of the Moon had a lot of bad romances, but this love story here is much better. Meanwhile, back on Silandra, 6 Tlanimas appear out of nowhere. They claim they're looking for the Unbound, some renegade Tlanimas, and this plot line will continue in later books. They kill the insane mates that is still following the ship. In the battle, the warren they're in, which is part of the Elder Warren of Shadow, which was for some reason shattered, and what is now known as the Warren of Shadow is just a shadow of it, because Shadow is full of deceptions, etc. The warren therein is wounded, so one of the Tlanimas sacrifices himself to patch it up. It's a Tlanimas that is clanless because the rest of his clan is destroyed, I believe. And it is said that he will spend an eternity in suffering for this, and he's accepting that. And yes, this is another stating of the themes of Malazan, the theme of sacrifice, which is, it's true. And then the rest of the Tlanimas just bugger off. And something that Malazan does is that the entire series is not one big plot. It is a knot of different plot lines, some of which meet and some of which have started way before the books, and they may end way after the books, but they just intersect with the plot lines we do follow. We only follow a few of the plot lines, and through them we witness the entire world. And again, this makes Malazan unique and makes the Malazan series be so much richer than your average fantasy that revolves around a group of heroes that are going to do something important. Chapter 10. Throughout all those chapters, I omitted to say that Duiker was hunting for Coltrane's army, and we learn a lot about what a badass Coltrane is by reading of Duiker meeting the outcome of the battles that the 7th Army gives or by having people relate to him what is happening. And because of that, Coltrane and his weekends start to feel legendary. So he finally catches up to the army, and he goes into a meeting, and there he says that there is the division between the ranks, because of course there is. It's Malazan, because we have the spoiled nobles that make insane demands of Coltrane, and Coltrane ignores them, as he should. But then, of course, we know that the Malazan nobles are spoiled since Malik Rel appeared earlier. So yes, there is the foreshadowing I was talking about, and a lot of seeds planted are starting to pay off. Even this early, we're only halfway through the book by this point. Then he follows the Wiccan warlocks into a ritual, and it goes sideways because the convergence of Soltakens and Divers means that the Warrens are full of them. So yes, there is no way to use sorcery at this point, but the Wiccan warlocks have elder knowledge, and they have made deals with desert spirits to help them. And then we get the first big battle of the book, as Coltrane is trying to cross a river and there's an army on the other side of it, and this battle is fantastic. We have a lot of epic battles in this book, and some insane world building, and yeah, I mean, this battle is amazing. It really feels very tense, very rich. It's stuff happening, there are twists and turns in it, and we see everything through Duiker's point of view. Also, some of the spells that are used in the battle are way too primitive and way too sinister in a way, because at some point Neil, one of the Wiccan warlocks, who is actually a little child with the soul of a warlock in it, so that makes it extra creepy, is able to raise an army of undead zombies to attack the enemies. And then you have the engineers of the Malazan army pulling different tricks and using bridges and etc. Different tricks throughout the battles in this book, which reminds me both of some of actually reminds me of history of what Alexander the Great was doing when he had a fight with much superior forces in number, and the tricks he pulled and the tactics, and it shows the ingenuity of the Malazans, how they managed to take over the known world in a way. So that makes it very interesting. And of course, yes, there is the whole Wiccan children warlocks for I mean, it reminds me of, it's probably based on Native American myths. I mean, I can remember the Manitou by Graham Masterton and Musquimacus, and I seriously can see Musquimacus as the leader of the Wiccan Sormo Inath. I can see Sormo Inath, the leader of the warlocks, as Musquimacus from the Manitou. And Musquimacus, if you haven't read the Manitou, it's a horror book by Graham Masterton. He was a sinister guy, alright? And not just the battle magic. To that, we have the Wiccan warlocks going out. They have won one of the native tribes, and this tribe has a god, which is an ascendant that is very cruel, and it was trapped into the good ice. So they go there and they break the ice so that the land spirits that help them will tear apart the god and feed on it. Yes, it's Malazan, it's grim and dark. Now you know why many people consider Malazan Book of the Fallen a grim dark fantasy series, because fuck, it's grim and dark sometimes. But of course, Coltrane's army may have won the battle, but it sustained a lot of losses. And of course, the nobles cannot stop stirring up problems, because when Book 2 ends, it ends with the nobles complaining about Coltrane taking their servants away. So yeah, more infighting and mistrust. But of course, this is the entire theme of the book. So yeah, it's bound to happen. So yeah, that was Book 2, Raraku, and there's a video about Book 3 and another about Book 4 coming along. So if you like this, have to say, press like, subscribe, etc. Thank you for watching.